My best friend had an affair with my father and used me to get into our house to see him. My best friend had been walking into my house without knocking for so long that nobody even looked up anymore when the side door opened. She knew the code, knew which cabinet held the good coffee, knew my mother hated wet spoons in the sugar jar, and knew my father took his lunch to work in the same faded container every weekday. She was 23, same as me, and had been part of our lives since our first year of high school. Calling her a guest would have sounded ridiculous. Guests didn't leave sweaters over the back of your kitchen chairs or argue with your mother about whether leftovers were still safe. She was basically family, which is a sentence I now hear in my head, with the kind of bitter little laugh that makes people uncomfortable. I'm Marin, and at the time I was finishing school while living with my parents in a city where rent had gotten high enough to make moving out feel like a personal insult. I paid part of the utilities, bought groceries when I could, and worked shifts at a small office near campus. My mother worked part-time doing administrative work and had adjusted her schedule years earlier when I was younger. My father had the steadier income, the predictable routine, and the personality everyone described as quiet. Not kind exactly, and not cold either. Just quiet. He fixed loose cabinet doors, watched the evening news with the volume too low, and rarely raised his voice. If you had asked me whether my parents were happy, I would have said they were normal. That answer feels embarrassingly naive now, but normal was what I had. My friend fit into that normal so completely that my mother kept her favorite tea in the pantry. When she came over after work, my mother would ask whether she had eaten before asking how her day went. My father didn't act especially close to her, at least not in any way I noticed. He would say hello, make some dry comment about us taking over the kitchen, and disappear into the living room or the garage. Nothing about him around her made me uneasy. Nothing about her around him made me protective. That matters, because later people asked me whether I had seen signs, and every time somebody asked, it sounded like they were handing me a quiz I had somehow failed. The truth is that I trusted both of them so deeply that my brain never bothered looking for danger. My friend had seen me cry over bad grades, bad dates, money, my parents, and one extremely unfortunate haircut that made me look like a mushroom for 6 months. She knew the code to my phone for emergencies. My mother had driven her home during storms and helped her fill out job applications. My father had changed a tire for her once in our driveway, while she stood there complaining about how adulthood was a scam. We had years of ordinary memories stacked on top of each other, and every one of those memories worked like insulation. Even when something odd happened, the history around it kept me from feeling the cold. So when she started talking about a married man, I didn't connect it to my family. Why would I? I assumed he worked with her. She had recently started a receptionist job at a medical office, and she said the man was older, unhappy, and basically separated emotionally, which is the kind of phrase people use when they know the truth sounds bad. I told her that emotional separation did not count as actual separation. She rolled her eyes and said I was being judgmental. Then she laughed, stole half my sandwich, and changed the subject. That was how our conversations worked. Serious, defensive, funny, over. I thought she was making a messy choice with some stranger. I had no idea she was describing my father while sitting at my mother's kitchen table. Over the next several weeks, the married man became a regular topic. Although she never gave me enough details to identify him, she would show up after work looking irritated and say he had canceled plans because things were tense at home. She said his wife depended on him financially, and that leaving would be complicated. She said he had promised the marriage had been dead for years. I wish I could tell you, I immediately said, that is the oldest line in the world. But I was softer with her than that. I told her she deserved somebody available, and she accused me of making it sound simple. It's not like I planned this, she said one evening while we sat at the kitchen table with takeout containers between us. No one plans to make a terrible decision, I said. That's usually why it's called a terrible decision. She gave me a look, but she smiled a little. I thought I had gotten through to her. Yes, I really believed one decent sentence could fix months of bad choices. I was 23 and still occasionally confused honesty with influence. My mother was cleaning the counter nearby and had clearly heard more than my friend realized. She didn't say anything that night, but a few days later the subject came up again. My friend was complaining that the man had spent an entire weekend with his wife's family after saying he would be free. My mother walked in halfway through and gently said, "You're going to get hurt if you keep waiting for someone who is still married." She didn't say it sharply. She wasn't moralizing. Honestly, she sounded worried. My mother treated my friend like a daughter, and that was exactly how the advice came out. My friend's whole face changed anyway. She waited until my mother left the room and then whispered, Why does she keep listening to my business? I stared at her. You're discussing it in her kitchen. That doesn't mean she gets to comment. She's worried about you. She doesn't know anything about it. Then stop talking about it here. That came out harsher than I intended. Her expression went flat, and for a second she looked almost offended on someone else's behalf. Not her own. She said my mother had no right to judge a relationship she didn't understand. I told her there was not much to understand about a married man sneaking around. She shoved her chair back and said she had to leave. The argument lasted maybe 4 minutes, but it stayed with me because her reaction felt too big. I assumed she was ashamed and taking it out on me. That explanation was comfortable, so I accepted it. Later, when I replayed the scene, I understood why my mother's advice had hit her so hard. It wasn't general advice coming from some older woman. It was the wife, unknowingly telling her husband's affair partner to walk away. After that, my friend stopped giving me long updates, but she became weirdly interested in schedules. She would ask when my classes ended, whether I was working on Friday, whether my mother was visiting my grandparents soon. Again, none of the questions sounded alarming by themselves. Friends ask about your schedule. Friends ask whether your parents are around. The danger was hidden inside normal words. My mother planned a short trip to see her parents after one of them had a minor medical procedure. She mentioned the dates over dinner, and my friend happened to be there. My friend asked exactly when she would return because she wanted to know whether we could all have dinner that weekend. I answered without thinking. I also mentioned that I had a long class on one of those afternoons and would probably stay on campus to study afterward. My father kept eating while we talked. He didn't look at her, and she didn't look at him. At the time, that meant nothing. Now I remember it too clearly. My mother left on a Tuesday morning. My friend texted me that afternoon asking whether I wanted coffee, then canceled because she said work had exhausted her. My father came home later than usual and said traffic had been awful. I believed both of them because believing them required no effort. Suspicion requires a starting point, and I didn't have one. 2 days later, an afternoon class was canceled because the instructor was sick. I had left a folder at home, so I texted my friend that I was unexpectedly free and drove back. She didn't answer. I parked beside my father's car without finding it unusual because he sometimes worked from home, then entered through the side door using the code she knew better than some relatives did. The house felt wrong before I knew why. There was a purse on the small bench near the stairs, and I recognized it immediately because I had helped my friend pick it out at a discount store. My first thought was that she had stopped by to surprise me. My second thought was that she might be upstairs borrowing clothes, because boundaries had become very flexible after years of friendship. Then I heard movement above me, followed by the bathroom door opening. I went upstairs calling her name. She stepped into the hallway wrapped in one of my mother's towels. For 1 full second, my brain tried to rescue me. Maybe something had spilled on her. Maybe a pipe had burst. Maybe she had gotten sick and needed a shower. The mind can manufacture entire stupid little worlds when the truth is standing in front of it. Then my father appeared behind her with his shirt open and his belt unfastened. Nobody spoke. My friend clutched the towel at her chest even though nothing intimate was visible. My father looked at me with the expression he used when I had done something wrong as a teenager, which was almost impressive considering he was the half-dressed married man in the hallway. "Maren," he said. Like my name was a warning. I pulled out my phone. I didn't plan it. I didn't think about consent or evidence or consequences. I raised it and took one picture because some instinct told me they would lie the second I looked away. The image showed her in the towel, him with his shirt open, and the doorway behind them. It wasn't explicit, but it was clear enough that nobody could turn it into an innocent visit. My father stepped forward. "Put that away." "What is this?" "It isn't what you think." I laughed, and it came out loud and ugly. "She's wearing Mom's towel." My friend said my name softly, which made me angrier than anything else. She sounded like she was trying to calm a frightened animal. My father told me they had been talking and that she had gotten upset. He said she spilled something on herself. I looked at the dry hallway, the closed bedroom door, his belt, her bare feet, and I remember thinking that he had spent his entire adult life becoming a competent person, only to produce the worst lie I had ever heard. "Where are her clothes?" I asked. Neither answered. I sent the picture to my mother. My thumb shook so badly that I had to tap her name twice. Then I called her. My father moved toward me again, not aggressively enough to justify the fear I felt, but forcefully enough that I backed into the wall. He told me to wait, to calm down, to let everyone get dressed and explain. He kept saying nothing had happened today, which was such a specific word that I knew before anyone admitted it that this had been happening for a while. My mother answered from the road. I said, "You need to come home." She asked whether I was hurt. "No, Mom, I sent you a picture." Please pull over before you open it. That sentence broke something inside me. Until then, I had been furious and almost detached, like I was watching a scene happen to people who resembled my family. The moment I heard my mother ask whether I was safe, I started crying. I told her what I had seen. She went completely silent. My father took the phone from my hand before I could react. I grabbed for it, but he turned away and said my mother's name. His voice changed instantly. It became soft, reasonable, almost injured. He said there had been a misunderstanding. He said my friend had come by upset and needed help. My mother asked him why his shirt was open. He said he had been changing. In our bathroom? I yelled. While she was in your wife's towel? My friend stood there staring at him. At first she looked frightened, but then something else appeared in her face. She realized he was trying to save himself by making her sound unstable and accidental. He wasn't protecting their relationship. He was erasing it. She said, "Tell her the truth." My father covered the phone with his hand and told her to be quiet. That was when she snapped. "You said you were leaving her." He looked at her with pure panic. My mother heard enough. She asked me to take the phone back. I did, and she told me she was turning around. She had been less than halfway to my grandparents' house. She said she would stay on the line until I felt safe, but I told her I was going downstairs. I didn't want to be near either of them. As I reached the stairs, my friend called after me. It wasn't the first time. I stopped. My father told her again to shut up, and she laughed through tears. "Why? You're acting like I broke in." Then she said it had been going on for months. I wish I could say I handled that revelation with some kind of controlled dignity, but I turned around and screamed at both of them until my throat hurt. I asked my friend how many times she had sat across from me and complained about my father without saying his name. I asked whether she had enjoyed watching me give advice. She said no, of course not, but then tried to explain that she had wanted to tell me and he wouldn't let her. That phrase did something terrible to me. "He wouldn't let you?" She flinched. "You're not 12. He didn't make you come into this house. He didn't make you ask when Mom was leaving. You used me to schedule this." My father said I was being cruel and that she was emotional. I told him he had lost the right to describe anyone else's behavior. He kept insisting the marriage had already been struggling, as though I had asked for a review of his relationship. I hadn't. I had asked why my best friend was standing in my mother's towel. My friend admitted that some of her stories about the married man had been about him. She said not all of them were, then immediately looked like she wished she could pull the sentence back into her mouth. I asked what that meant. She said there had been someone else before, but it didn't matter. The detail was so unnecessary and chaotic that I almost laughed again. She had been lying in layers, and now the layers were falling off faster than she could manage them. My father sat on the edge of the stairs and pressed both hands to his face. He looked devastated, and for a brief, humiliating second, I felt sorry for him. That is the strange part nobody warns you about. A person can destroy your idea of them and still trigger old instincts. He was my father. Seeing him break down made some younger part of me want to fix it. Then I looked at my friend and remembered that he had done this inside the house he shared with my mother, using my trust as cover. I told my friend to get dressed and leave. She asked whether she could explain. I said she had already explained enough. She went into the bedroom to collect her clothes, and my father followed her. I shouted that if he closed the door, I would call the police. I didn't know whether that made sense, but it worked. He stayed in the hallway. She came downstairs wearing the clothes she had arrived in and carrying her purse. Her hair was wet and she looked younger than she had an hour earlier. At the door, she turned to me and said, "I love you. I know you don't believe that." I said, "I believe you love what I gave you." That isn't the same thing. The line sounded good when it came out, but I didn't feel powerful. I felt sick. The moment she left, I ran to the kitchen sink and threw up. My father stood behind me, asking whether I needed water. The normality of the question made me lose control again. I turned and told him not to touch anything, not to clean anything, not to act like my father for the next 5 minutes. He said he was still my father. Then why did you do this with her? He said the affair had nothing to do with me. People love saying that when they want the consequences to stay neatly contained. It had everything to do with me because she was my closest friend, because it happened in my home, because they used information I gave them, and because I was now the one waiting for my mother to return so I could watch her marriage end in real time. My father tried to explain. According to him, he had felt invisible for years. My mother was always tired. Their conversations were about bills and chores. My friend made him feel admired. He said it had started with messages after he helped her with her car, then coffee, then an emotional connection. I asked when the emotional connection required my mother's towel. He told me sarcasm wasn't helping. I told him honesty would have helped months earlier. My mother arrived a few hours later. I saw her car pull into the driveway and ran outside before she had fully parked. She stepped out looking composed in a way that scared me more than tears would have. She hugged me first. Then she walked into the house and asked my father to pack enough clothes for several days. He told her they needed to talk privately. "No," she said. "You've had privacy." He said leaving would make everything worse. She said staying would make her call someone to remove him. They argued quietly at first, then louder, but she never screamed. My mother went upstairs with her phone and photographed drawers, shelves, and the closet before he packed. She said she wanted a record of what was there because she wasn't going to spend the next month being accused of hiding or damaging his things. He called that dramatic. She looked at him and said, "You brought our daughter's best friend into our bathroom. We passed dramatic before lunch." He went to stay with his brother that night. The first night after he left was almost insultingly ordinary. The dishwasher needed to be unloaded. A package sat by the front door. My mother's work bag was still on the chair where she had dropped it before going on her trip. I kept expecting the house to look damaged, but betrayal doesn't knock over furniture. It just changes what every room means. My mother and I sat at the kitchen table until after midnight. She asked me to tell her exactly what I had seen, then apologized for making me repeat it. I showed her the photograph again. She zoomed in, stared at it, and put my phone face down. She didn't ask me to send it anywhere else. She didn't threaten to post it. She just said, "Thank you for telling me." That nearly broke me. I told her I was sorry. For what? For not noticing. Her expression hardened. "No, we're not doing that." I started listing the questions my friend had asked, the canceled plans, the times my father had come home late. My mother listened until I mentioned a weekend when I had told my friend I would be out of town. Her face changed because my father had claimed he was working extra hours that same weekend. We began reconstructing months from scraps. It was miserable and weirdly addictive. Every ordinary memory became evidence. A grocery receipt. A day he showered immediately after coming home. A time my friend brought my mother flowers for no reason. We sat there making connections and then doubting ourselves, because not every strange detail had to be part of the affair. Pain turns you into a detective who hates every answer. At one point, my mother asked, "How did you not see what she was doing?" The question landed like a slap. She didn't yell it, and I knew she was overwhelmed, but I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. "How did you not see what your husband was doing?" She stared at me. "I trusted her because you trusted her. She was in this house because both of you treated her like family. Don't put this on me." My mother covered her mouth and started crying. She apologized immediately. I wanted to stay angry, but seeing her cry made my anger collapse into guilt, which made me angry again. Emotional maturity was not exactly thriving in our kitchen that night. She said, "You're right. That was unfair. I'm sorry." I sat back down and we cried without touching for a while. Then she reached across the table and I held her hand. The next morning she called out of work and scheduled a consultation with a family lawyer. She said she wasn't promising divorce that day, but she needed to understand her options. My father called repeatedly. She let every call go to voicemail. He texted me instead, asking me to convince her to talk to him. I didn't answer. My friend also texted me. Her first message was an apology. The second explained that my father had pursued her. The third said she had been vulnerable. The fourth accused him of lying. By the sixth message, the apology had turned into a defense brief. I wrote back, "You knew he was my father and her husband. Stop contacting me." She responded that I was refusing to understand the power imbalance because he was older. I stared at that sentence for a long time. She was an adult, and he absolutely had more age, money, and family authority, which mattered. I could recognize that without erasing her choices. Both things could be true. My father could have manipulated her, and she could still have betrayed me. I blocked her. My mother did not block my father because the lawyer advised keeping communication in writing when possible. She sent one message telling him not to return without arranging it first. He replied with paragraphs about how much he loved her, how ashamed he was, how lonely he had felt, and how the affair had never changed his commitment to the family. That last claim was so absurd my mother laughed for the first time since coming home. "Apparently commitment is very flexible now," she said. The laugh turned into sobbing. I sat beside her on the couch while she cried into both hands. I hated my father. I hated my friend. I hated myself for being relieved that my mother was directing more anger at him than at me. Most of all, I hated how quickly our lives had become organized around what they had done. By the end of that week, my mother had decided to separate formally. The house had been hers before the marriage and remained only in her name, which simplified one part of the mess, although the lawyer warned that finances and support could still take negotiation. My father was allowed to retrieve more clothes at an arranged time. My uncle came with him. I stayed upstairs because I didn't trust myself to be civil. Through the floor, I heard my father ask my mother whether they were really throwing away their marriage over one mistake. My mother said, "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. You scheduled this." A few days later, my friend's mother showed up at our front door furious on her daughter's behalf. I had known her for years, although not well enough to call her anything except my friend's mother in my own head. She stood on the porch with her arms folded and said we had humiliated her daughter, photographed her without permission, and invented an affair because my mother wanted somebody to blame for her marriage problems. For a moment, I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. Invented? She said her daughter had gone to our house because she was having a panic attack. My father had tried to help, and I had walked in at the worst possible moment. According to the version she had been given, my friend had gotten sick, spilled water on herself, and borrowed a towel while her clothes dried. My father's shirt was open because he had changed after she spilled something on him too. It was the same terrible lie, only now it had been polished. My mother asked her to leave. I should have let that happen, but I was tired of being cast as unstable in a story I had actually witnessed. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photograph. I explained where the clothes had been, what my father had admitted, and what her daughter had shouted when she realized he was denying the relationship. The anger drained out of her face so quickly that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She stared at the image and asked whether anything more explicit existed. I said no. Then she asked whether I had sent it to anyone besides my mother. I said no again. She leaned against the porch railing and whispered, "She told me you were trying to ruin her life. My life was the one she walked into." That sounded colder than I intended, but I didn't take it back. My friend's mother apologized to my mother, then apologized to me. She said she had believed her daughter because that was what mothers did. My mother answered, "Believing your child doesn't require attacking mine." The woman nodded, and I could see that the sentence hurt because it was true. She left saying she would speak to her daughter. An hour later, my friend sent me an email because she was blocked everywhere else. She said I had turned her mother against her. I deleted it without replying, then pulled it out of the trash and read it twice more. I wish I could claim I had immediate, perfect boundaries. I did not. I was angry, curious, and still emotionally attached to the person she had pretended to be. That evening, my mother asked whether I regretted showing the photograph. I said no, but the truth was messier. I didn't regret correcting the lie. I did regret that the photograph now felt like an object with power. I kept checking that it was still saved, as though the truth might disappear if my phone broke. My mother suggested I store a copy somewhere secure and stop looking at it. She was right. I hated that she had to be practical about any of this. My father learned about the confrontation through my friend. Even though I had blocked them both, they were still talking then, and she told him that her mother had seen the picture and knew the affair was real. He sent my mother a message accusing me of spreading private images. My mother replied that the photograph showed no nudity, had been shared only with the directly affected people, and existed because he had lied. Then she told him that if he wanted communication, it would be about finances and collecting his belongings. Nothing else. He did not respond for 2 days. The silence felt less like peace and more like someone inhaling before another argument. The next argument arrived through screenshots. My friend emailed me a folder of message captures between her and my father. Her note said, "Since everyone wants the truth, here it is." The messages showed him contacting her late at night, telling her she understood him better than anyone, promising his marriage was already over in every way that mattered. He complained that my mother had stopped appreciating him. He said he planned to leave after the right time, a phrase that apparently meant never. Reading my father flirt with my best friend was one of the most nauseating experiences of my life. The tone was familiar, but wrong. He used jokes I had heard at dinner. He complained about chores my mother did more often than he did. In one message, he referred to my mother's upcoming trip and wrote that the house would finally be quiet. I had to stop reading and walk outside because the walls suddenly felt contaminated. The screenshots also proved that he had initiated many of the conversations. That mattered, but not in the way my friend wanted it to. She expected me to see her as passive. Instead, I saw long replies, affectionate messages, and questions about when my mother would be away. She wasn't dragged through the side door. She used the code I had trusted her with. I answered once. "These make him look terrible. They don't make you innocent." She replied almost immediately that I was protecting him because he was family. I laughed out loud at that. I had barely spoken to him since he left. I was protecting nobody. I was refusing to become the judge in their competition over who had betrayed us more elegantly. Apparently, she told my father she had sent me the screenshots, because later that day he emailed his own selection. His messages showed her asking whether my mother had left yet, complaining when he canceled, and telling him she was tired of being hidden. In one exchange, she wrote that I was clueless enough not to notice anything. I read that line until the words blurred. My father's note said, "I need you to understand that this wasn't one-sided." I wrote back, "I already know there were two of you." Then I blocked his email address too. My mother read only the messages relevant to the timeline. She refused to read the romantic parts. She said she knew enough and did not need their words living in her head. I envied that discipline. I read everything. I searched dates, compared excuses, and found nights when my friend had been messaging him while sitting next to me on the couch. I felt like I had been present in their affair without knowing it. One night, I found a message sent during my birthday dinner. He had written that he couldn't wait to be alone with her. She had replied with a joke about how my mother kept asking whether she wanted dessert. I closed the laptop and cried so hard I got a headache. My mother found me in the kitchen and asked why I was doing this to myself. I need to know. No, you need there to be a version that hurts less. I told her she didn't understand because she had lost a husband while I had lost two people. The second the words came out, I regretted them. Her face tightened. "You think I only lost him?" She reminded me that she had loved my friend too, had fed her, protected her, and trusted her inside our home. She said she had lost the version of our family she thought existed. I apologized. She said she knew I was hurting, but pain didn't make us the only person in the room. That conversation stayed with me. My mother was not perfect. She had blamed me for missing signs, and I had minimized her grief because mine felt louder. We were trying to support each other while constantly stepping on the same bruises. So I deleted the screenshots from my everyday devices after saving one organized copy for my mother's lawyer in case anything relevant came up. Then I stopped reading them. Not because I had achieved peace, but because I was exhausted and still had assignments due. Betrayal may wreck your family, but school portals remain deeply committed to deadlines. For several days, both my father and my former friend went quiet. I started sleeping a little better. My mother returned to work and told only her supervisor that she was dealing with a separation. She didn't tell coworkers the details, which surprised me because part of me wanted everyone to know exactly what he had done. My mother said public humiliation would not repair private damage. I thought that sounded annoyingly mature. Then my former friend came back to the house. She no longer had any reason to expect my father there. He was staying with his brother, and she did not know the address because they had always met elsewhere. After she exposed his promises and blamed him to her mother, he stopped answering her. She had tried new email addresses and calls from unknown numbers, but he ignored them, so she decided I should fix it. She stood on the porch pounding hard enough to shake the frame and demanded that I tell her where he was. My mother told me not to open the door. We both stayed inside while my former friend shouted that he had used her, that we were helping him disappear, and that I owed her one conversation after years of friendship. I spoke through the closed door. "I don't owe you access to my father," she said. "You know what he promised me. I know what both of you did." She called me cruel. Then she called my mother pathetic for wanting him back, which was especially ridiculous because my mother had already filed paperwork to move the divorce forward. My mother stepped away from the door because she was shaking. I told my former friend to leave or I would call the police. She yelled that I had always been jealous of her. That accusation was so disconnected from reality that it almost stunned me into silence. She said I hated that my father chose her, as though this were a competition I had entered. I told her she needed help. She responded by kicking one of the planters beside the porch. I called the police. Before anyone arrived, she walked toward the driveway. I thought she was finally leaving, but she pulled out her keys and dragged one along the side of my mother's car. The sound was sharp enough that I heard it through the window. Then she struck the side mirror until it cracked and hung at an angle. I started recording from inside. My hands shook, but I did not go outside. She looked directly at the window and shouted, "Go ahead. Record me like you always do." That sentence was almost funny considering I had recorded her exactly once before, while she was standing in my house after sleeping with my father. The officers arrived after she had moved back to the sidewalk. There was no dramatic chase, no handcuffs slammed onto anyone, none of the nonsense people imagine when they hear police were called. They separated us, took statements, watched my video, photographed the damage, and issued paperwork related to the vandalism. My mother told them clearly that my former friend no longer had permission to enter the property. They explained what to do if she returned. My former friend cried while speaking to them. She said she had been abandoned and was having a breakdown. I believed both things. I also believed she had damaged a car because nobody would give her a man's address. Being hurt did not make the repair bill disappear. The insurance covered most of the damage, and my mother paid the deductible because she wanted the car fixed without turning the whole thing into another prolonged fight. She kept the report and the video. My former friend's mother called once to apologize again and offered to pay part of the cost. My mother declined and said her daughter needed to handle the consequences herself. After the police left, I sat on the kitchen floor. My mother sat beside me, still wearing her work clothes. And we stayed there until our legs went numb. "I can't believe this is our life," I said. She looked at the damaged mirror through the window and answered, "It isn't. It's a terrible part of our life." At the time, I thought she was splitting hairs. Later, I understood why the distinction mattered. My father contacted me through his brother about 2 weeks later. His brother called and said my father wanted a calm, private conversation. I nearly refused, but curiosity won. Also, some stubborn part of me wanted to see whether he could say anything that made sense. We met in a quiet coffee shop in the middle of the afternoon. His brother sat at another table, close enough to intervene if either of us got loud, but far enough to pretend we had privacy. My father looked older. That was the first thing I noticed, and I resented it because it made him easier to pity. He had lost weight and wore a shirt I had seen him wear 100 times. He asked about school. I told him not to do that. "I'm still allowed to care how you're doing," he said. "You're allowed to care. I'm not required to make it comfortable." He nodded and stared at his coffee. Then he apologized. The apology was better than his earlier excuses, but still crowded with explanations. He had felt lonely. He had been struggling with getting older. My friend admired him. The attention made him feel like somebody other than a husband who paid bills and fixed things. He said it had become real before he understood what was happening. I interrupted. "You scheduled it around Mom's trips." He flinched. "That isn't something that just happened to you." He admitted that he had known it was wrong. He said he thought he could end it before anyone found out. I asked why he had not ended it after the first message, the first meeting, the first time she entered our house for him. He had no answer that wasn't another description of his feelings. Then he offered to help me financially. He said he could cover more of my tuition or help me move into an apartment. He framed it as concern, but the timing made it feel like a bribe. I asked whether the money came with phone calls, dinners, or pretending we were okay. "No," he said too quickly. I told him I did not want to be bought into a relationship. He looked offended and said that was not what he meant. I said maybe it wasn't what he meant consciously, but it was what he was doing. For the first time, he stopped defending himself. He said, "I liked being wanted. I thought I could keep it separate. I didn't think you would ever see it." There it was. Not loneliness, not a dead marriage, not confusion. He liked it and thought he would get away with it. I asked whether he loved her. He said he did not know. Then he admitted the connection had faded almost immediately once everything became public. They had argued over who caused the exposure, who lied more, and who owed whom an apology. The secrecy had made the relationship feel special. Without secrecy, it was just two people furious with each other. I wanted that information to satisfy me, but it didn't. Their relationship failing did not restore anything. He asked whether I hated him. "I hate what you did. I don't know what I feel about you yet." He cried quietly. I looked away because watching him cry felt too intimate. He asked whether we could meet again. I said any future contact would happen on my terms and not through surprise messages, gifts, or relatives. He agreed. When I stood to leave, he said, "I'll always be your dad." I answered, "Then act like that without demanding I act like your daughter on schedule." I drove home feeling both stronger and worse. Closure is advertised like a clean door clicking shut. In reality, it is often one painful conversation that creates 3 new questions. The divorce moved forward without becoming a courtroom spectacle. My mother's lawyer handled the practical conversations because my parents could not discuss money without sliding back into the affair. The house had belonged to my mother before the marriage and remained in her name, so she stayed. They negotiated temporary support because my father had earned more while she had reduced her hours. The rest was appointments, signatures, and arguments over ordinary possessions. My father collected the rest of his belongings on a Saturday. His brother came again. My mother had labeled boxes and made a list so nobody could later claim something had disappeared. I stayed downstairs this time. When my father carried out the last box, he paused in the hallway and looked toward the kitchen. "I'm sorry," he said to my mother. She did not ask what part he meant. "I know." He seemed to expect more. There wasn't more. After he left, my mother and I changed the side door code and replaced the lock. The old code had been my birthday. I had always thought that was sweet. Now it felt like a security mistake with emotional symbolism attached. We chose a random sequence and wrote it in a sealed envelope in case one of us forgot. My mother joked that apparently love was not an effective access control system. It was a dark joke, but we laughed until we cried. My former friend moved in with a coworker after her mother refused to let her stay indefinitely without contributing rent or attending counseling. I learned that from her mother, who contacted my mother only to arrange repayment for part of the car damage. My mother accepted a payment plan eventually because refusing it would have kept the issue open. The payments were small and arrived without messages. My father and my former friend stopped communicating. Each blamed the other for ruining everything. That information reached me through relatives, and one email I should not have opened. The email came from an address I had not blocked and said she needed me to understand that she had lost him too. I wanted to reply, "You never had him." Then I realized that would start a conversation, and I did not want one. I deleted it. My relationship with my mother improved and worsened in cycles. Some days we were closer than we had ever been. We cooked dinner together, watched ridiculous home renovation shows, and reorganized closets. Other days she looked at me and saw the person who had delivered the worst news of her life. She never blamed me directly again, but pain has expressions before it has words. I would catch her staring at the stairs or the bathroom door, and the whole house would become quiet. I suggested she move. She said she refused to let their choices remove her from a home she had bought before she met my father. Then she admitted she had considered it. We painted the bedroom, replaced the towels, and turned my father's old office into a small reading room. Those changes were not magical. A new wall color does not erase betrayal. Still, making decisions helped. I also moved some of my own things around because the house had begun to feel like a museum of what happened. I took down a framed photograph that included my former friend and put it in a box. Then I found more photographs in drawers, albums, and old envelopes. Birthdays, graduations, cheap vacations, ordinary afternoons. She was everywhere. I could not throw them away. I also could not look at them. So I put them in one large box and wrote "later" on the top. It was not a brave solution, but it was honest. Several months later, my former friend reached me through an email address I had never blocked. She said she was in counseling, admitted she had betrayed me and my mother, and then spent most of the message explaining how badly my father had hurt her. She wrote that she hoped someday I could admit she had been a victim too. Of course she had been hurt. My father had lied to her, made promises he never intended to keep, and discarded her the moment the affair became inconvenient. None of that erased the fact that she had knowingly used my trust to enter our home and hide a relationship with him. I drafted a cruel reply, then a long reply, then one sentence saying I believed her pain but did not want contact. I deleted all three. Silence felt unfinished, but answering would have reopened a door I had spent months closing. My mother found me staring at the screen and asked whether I wanted to talk about it. I said no, then immediately told her everything. She listened and said, "You don't have to convince her that she hurt you. She already knows." I deleted the email and blocked the address. It was not forgiveness, revenge, or some grand act of healing. It was simply the last decision I wanted to make about that friendship. By the time I finished school, the story had stopped being the first thing I thought about every morning. It was still there, but it no longer occupied the entire room inside my head. I accepted a full-time office job and started saving more seriously for an apartment. My mother joked that I was abandoning her. Then she immediately sent me listings and asked whether each building had good lighting. I moved into a small place about 20 minutes away. The rent was painful, the kitchen was tiny, and the upstairs neighbor seemed committed to dropping furniture at midnight. I loved it. The first night I sat on the floor eating noodles from the pot because I had not unpacked bowls. My mother came over with towels, cleaning supplies, and enough groceries to survive a minor disaster. She also brought the old framed family photograph that had sat in our hallway for years. My father was in it. I asked why she thought I wanted it. "I didn't," she said. "I thought you should decide." I looked at the photograph and put it in a drawer. Not displayed, not destroyed. Another later. Living away from the house changed my relationship with my father. I no longer felt that speaking to him meant letting him back into my mother's space. After several months, I agreed to meet him for lunch. The conversation was awkward and limited. He did not ask me to forgive him. I did not reassure him that we would be okay. He told me he had moved into a small apartment after leaving his brother's house. He said he was still in counseling. He had no contact with my former friend. I told him I did not want updates about her unless there was a safety issue. He agreed. We talked about my job, then about a broken shelf in my apartment. He offered to fix it. I said no because I knew a simple repair could become an excuse for closeness I was not ready for. He accepted that too. When we left, he hugged me after asking permission. I hugged him back for maybe 2 seconds. In the car, I cried from grief, relief, anger, and guilt all at once. Very efficient. My emotions had apparently decided to carpool. I called my mother because keeping the lunch secret would have felt wrong. She went quiet, then asked whether I was okay. I said yes. She said she was glad I had made the choice for myself. I could hear how hard the words were for her. "I'm not choosing him over you," I said. "I know. You don't sound like you know. I know in my brain. My feelings are slower." That honesty saved us from an argument. I told her my feelings were slow too. Contact with my father remained occasional. A lunch every few months, a short call, nothing that resembled the old relationship. He had consequences he could not negotiate away. He missed my graduation dinner because I did not invite him. He did not come to my apartment. He did not get immediate access to milestones because he felt regret. My former friend sent no more messages. Sometimes I searched her name on a social app, then stopped myself before opening anything. Once I did look. She seemed ordinary. She had a new job and photographs with people I did not know. Seeing her continue with life felt unfair for about 5 minutes, until I remembered that I was continuing too. People do not always receive consequences in a shape visible from the outside. She lost us. My father lost his marriage and the automatic trust of his daughter. My mother lost the future she thought she had. I lost a friendship and a version of my family. None of that could be measured by whether somebody looked sad in a photograph. The last time the whole thing forced itself back into the center of our lives was when my mother decided to replace the old side door. The frame had warped, and cold air came through during winter. She hired a local contractor, and when he removed the keypad, he asked whether she wanted another code lock. My mother looked at me. I looked at her. "A regular lock," she said. It was such a small decision, but I felt my chest tighten. That door had been the route my former friend used for years. She had entered carrying coffee, birthday gifts, bad news, and eventually secrets. Replacing it should not have mattered as much as it did. While the contractor worked, my mother and I cleared the reading room one final time. The box marked "later" was still in the closet. She asked whether I wanted to take it to my apartment. I opened the lid. The photographs were exactly where we had left them. My former friend's face appeared in dozens of versions. Younger, laughing, annoyed, tired, dressed for celebrations, sitting cross-legged on our couch. My father appeared too, still wearing the identity I had once assigned him. I realized I no longer felt the urgent need to decide what every picture meant. Some documented real happiness. Some documented trust that was later betrayed. A photograph did not have to pick one truth. "Keep it here," I said. "Are you sure?" "For now." My mother smiled slightly. "We're very committed to for now. It's been working." We carried the box to the back of the closet. She asked where exactly I wanted it, and I told her the bottom shelf was fine. Then we walked out of the room while the contractor fitted the new door downstairs. There was no dramatic feeling of freedom. I did not suddenly forgive anyone. My mother did not announce that she was healed. We went to the kitchen, made coffee, and argued about whether the new door looked too plain. It was normal in a new way. I still have moments when I remember something and feel stupid for not seeing it. Then I remind myself that trust is not stupidity. The people who abused it are responsible for what they did with it. I can admit that my father felt lonely, that my former friend wanted approval, and that both of them were hurt people without pretending hurt made betrayal inevitable. My father and I may never be close again. We may become something smaller and more careful. My mother may always pause when someone mentions infidelity. I may always hesitate before giving anyone a key. Those are not neat endings, but they are real ones. The best friend who once walked into our house without knocking is no longer part of my life. The father who once felt permanent now has to ask before entering it. My mother and I are not stronger because we deserved what happened. We are simply still here, carrying what survived. When the contractor finished, he handed my mother 2 new keys. She gave one to me, and I nearly refused because I did not live there anymore. Then I took it. Not because the house was unchanged, not because our family was repaired. I took it because access meant something different now. It was not automatic, and it was not owed. It was chosen. My mother locked the new door, checked it once, and said, "Dinner?" I said yes. We left the box in the closet, the old code in the past, and the new key in my pocket.